This is Beyond Abuse Radio, a safe place to find healing and embrace your beauty. And now, your executive producer and host, life coach, and spiritual director, Misa Leonessa.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond Abuse Radio. This is Misa Leonessa, your host, and Beyond Abuse is a safe place to find the healing and wholeness and embrace your own beauty. Each week I bring you resources, encouragement, information, and support to help you in the journey to transform your trauma into beauty. Healing from trauma isn't easy, but it is absolutely possible. And the good news is that you don't have to do it alone. Beyond Abuse Radio is part of the Oabi Voices United Radio Network, the place where global voices unite against abuse and domestic violence. Breaking the silence isn't always a popular choice, but it is always the right choice. So get educated and get informed and come on this journey with us as we speak out against abuse, domestic violence, and human trafficking. Thank you for joining me today. I am thrilled to have you with us, and congratulations on taking the time to take good care of yourself. And as always, I'd like to start today's show with a gratefulness moment. So take just a moment and think about what you are grateful for today. I'm grateful just to have this opportunity to be with you, as well as for our special guest today, Rachel Grant. I'll be introducing her more in a few minutes. And I'm grateful that I am able to just physically be capable of doing this show today. I haven't been feeling well, and by the grace of God, I am here, and we will overcome. We will move forward. So I'm grateful just to be able to show up and to do this show today. So as I said, last week we just recently hit the 1,000 mark of having over 1,000 people listen in a week to a single show. And I'm going to be posting something special on the Beyond Abuse Radio page for you all to download as a reminder of how beautiful you are. And encourage you to share this show and other episodes with your friends. All the episodes are currently available as archives, and they will slowly start coming off the archives as I work on creating audio products, which I'll be selling to help fund the expenses for Beyond Abuse Radio. So if you would like to listen to any of the previous 27 shows, I encourage you to do that, especially the first half of the shows will start coming off in as I take groups of them in a series to create those audio products that will be available for purchase on my website. You can check out my website, which now has a Beyond Abuse Radio page on it with all of the updates. You can find the archives listed there, as well as what is coming in the future. So share that with your friends. The website is www.misacoach.com. That's M as in Mary, I-S-A, coach.com. And again, you can go there to get more information about the radio show, and you can also read about my services, and eventually there'll be an articles page up where you'll be able to read the articles that I have been writing and my newsletter as well. So please share these links with your friends, send them the announcements, email them, send them on Facebook, LinkedIn, however you can spread the word. And let's keep growing this, because there are so many of us who are walking this journey together. And as I said, we are not alone. We don't have to do this in isolation. And I just really encourage you to utilize this as one of your resources, and also as the opportunity to link arms with other survivors and to bring them in. We have a special event coming up this week called 1 Billion Rising. I don't know if you've heard of that yet. It's a global campaign calling for an end to violence and for gender equality. It's going to take place on Valentine's Day from 5:30 to 7. It's taking place in over 200 cities throughout the world. And I'll be participating in our local expression of 1 Billion Rising in Santa Cruz, California. I encourage you to look online, look it up, and see where the 1 Billion Rising event is happening on Valentine's Day, Thursday at 5:30 in 200 places throughout the world. And I would also encourage you, if you feel moved to do so, to look on YouTube and to find the choreography for the flash mob that's going to be taking place. The choreography is going to be almost the same from city to city. So you can go and learn the choreography. You can also find out when the practices are going to be for your particular city and show up. So that might be something fun to do. I know for me, movement is a really important part of expressing my healing, and so doing this dance for me and coming together with many, many all over the globe to do this as an expression of our overcoming abuse in our life is very meaningful to me, and I hope it will be for you too. So I encourage you to look up 1 Billion Rising and to participate in that in your local city. Coming up next week will be Embracing Your Beauty Part 2, where I will be picking up where we left off last week and expanding on that topic, more about embracing your beauty. And then we're going to be doing a 2-week series on what is spiritual abuse on the February 23rd and healing from spiritual abuse with special guest Dixie Diamante on March 2nd. March and April we'll see a new series on courage. We'll be doing a 6-week series on courage. So today's topic is on abandonment. What is abandonment? Abandonment defined is to withdraw one's support or help from, especially in spite of duty, allegiance, or responsibility, to desert. And as I said, I've been slightly deserted by Blog Talk Radio. They were supposed to come on and fix the issues here, and they initially responded very quickly, and then they just kind of fell into the black hole. So we're just going to do the best that we can today. Claudia Black from Psychology Today has written an article on abandonment, and she says, when children are raised with chronic loss without the psychological or physical protection they need and certainly deserve, it's quite natural for them to internalize incredible fear. Not receiving the necessary psychological or physical protection equals abandonment. And she says living with repeated abandonment experiences creates something we call toxic shame. And this shame arises from the painful messages that are implied in that experience of abandonment. And those messages might sound something like, you are not important, or you are not of value. And this is not necessarily spoken, and yet this is the pain from which we need to heal when we have experienced abandonment in our lives. For some children, the abandonment can be primarily physical, and this occurs when conditions necessary for thriving are replaced instead by a lack of appropriate supervision or an inadequate provision of nutrition, an inadequate clothing, housing, heat, or shelter, or physical or sexual abuse. When we are abused, that sends a very deep message of abandonment to each one of us. Children are totally dependent on their caretakers, and when we are abused or we are neglected, we receive that message that we believe the world is unsafe and that people aren't to be trusted and that we don't deserve adequate care or positive attention. Emotional abandonment can occur when our parents don't provide the emotional conditions and emotional environment necessary for healthy development. Emotional abandonment can be defined as occurring when a child has to hide a part of who he or she is in order to be accepted or not rejected. And that can look like internalizing the belief that it's not okay to make a mistake, it's not okay to show your feelings, or being told that the way you feel isn't true. A parent might say, you have nothing to cry about, so if you don't stop crying, I'll really give you something to cry about, or no, that really didn't hurt, or you have nothing to be angry about. They basically communicate that it's not okay to have needs, that everyone else's needs appear to be more important than yours, and that it's not okay to have success, to have your own ideas, your own thoughts, your own life, maybe apart from the family. And accomplishments are not acknowledged or are many times discounted. And there are other acts of abandonment that occur when children maybe don't live up to the expectations of their parents, or they're held responsible for other people's behavior, or maybe there's disapproval towards a child that's aimed at their entire beings or their identity rather than just a specific behavior, like telling a child that he's worthless when he doesn't do his homework, or that she's never going to be a good athlete because she missed that catch during the game. So personally, abandonment has been a large theme of my life, and I've had to pick up the pieces of abandonment quite often. And so as we talk further about this issue, we'll be sharing a little bit from our own lives as well about how we have dealt with abandonment issues, learning healthy trust. Maybe sometimes we don't ever completely get over the fears of abandonment, but we can still give people the opportunity to prove us wrong. So I would like to take a moment to introduce Rachel Grant. She's the owner and founder of Rachel Grant Coaching, and she's a trauma, recovery, and relationship coach. She's also the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage in recovery from sexual abuse. And with her support, clients learn to identify and break the patterns of thought and behavior that keep them from recovering from past sexual abuse or from making changes in their relationships. Rachel holds an MA in counseling psychology, and with this training in human behavior and cognitive development, she provides a compassionate and challenging approach for her clients while using coaching as opposed to therapeutic models. Rachel is a member of the International Coach Federation and San Francisco Coaches. And Rachel is also a personal friend of mine, and I welcome Rachel to our show today. Hello, Rachel, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Misa. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to finally get to do a show together.
Yeah. We're both under the weather, so it was good timing that we could just come together and are not feeling great, but to have a great conversation.
That's right. That's right. I sure appreciate that. So we're talking about the issue of abandonment today, as you know, and I know that these are issues that you don't just talk about that you've learned out of a book, but that you have worked with clients on these issues, and you've worked in your own life with these issues. So can you give us a working definition of abandonment?
Yeah, sure. When we think about abandonment, the initial way that we think about it is this idea of kind of being left, that we have this space where we're feeling connected or held, and then that protection or support goes away. One of my favorite parts of the definition of abandonment is to kind of be forsaken utterly. And it sounds so harsh, but it really captures, I think, a lot of the emotion of what it means when we feel abandoned, when we feel left, that it's not just we no longer have this person in our lives, that it feels so personal, that there's something about us that has been left behind or rejected or forsaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that phrasing is so powerful, to be forsaken utterly, and I certainly know what that has felt like in my own life, and that's a very difficult thing to recover from, especially as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. In my experience growing up, when I was molested by my grandfather when I was 10, there was a real moment where I felt that, of course, this person who I thought was going to protect me and was a support and somebody to love and care for me was instead engaging in behaviors that left me feeling vulnerable, scarred, upset, and questioning all sorts of things that I had never had to question before. And in some ways, for me, where I felt forsaken was in the kind of innocence of life, and that had somehow kind of been removed, and that now I was here in this space where I was thinking and feeling things that I didn't really even know how to process as a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And it feeling very much like there wasn't anybody who I could turn to kind of lead the way and guide me and kind of help me through this forest that now I was kind of thrown into.
Yeah. That's, as I shared, every time we're abused, that is an act of abandonment to us as children. And that creates a very difficult thing to overcome, being able to learn to trust people and not expect them to leave us when we need something or to protect us when we need protecting. So can you share with us, Rachel, what drives or causes our fear of abandonment?
Right. Well, so, abandonment is very much driven by our fear of the unknown. If we could look into the future and just know that that partner or that friend or that spouse is, they're going to be there no matter what and they're not going anywhere, we wouldn't have these fears and concerns about being left. But we don't know if that's going to be the case. It happens quite often that people we're connected to end up withdrawing. And sometimes, there's this feeling again that they are not, just forsaking us, but they're utterly forsaking us. I think of how many relationships we have that come in and out of our lives. And, of course, the greater the connection, the greater the risk, because we have more at stake should the person choose to walk away. And so the abandonment is very much a future-based phenomena. It's very much, it's driven by old fears, of course, old programming, old ideas that we got from our past about how people relate to each other. But the reason why it continues to be a fear is because it's about the future and it's about an unknown.
And it's an unknown that we're powerless to control. We are unable to predict those outcomes with individuals, and so it's very easy to just take the perspective that we indeed, in fact, are going to be abandoned again. And so, as you said, the more we have at stake, the closer we are to someone, the more we have to lose. So maybe just not to get as close because we expect that, in fact, they are not going to stay with us long term. So what do survivors often come to believe about people and relationships as a result of their childhood abandonment?
Well, so it's very common, as you've mentioned, among those who have been abused to struggle in this particular area of relationship. And because of the very real and tangible abandonment that we've had in the past and the loss of protection by those who are supposed to care for us. So one of the things that ends up happening, though, is we begin living as if this is going to be the case with everyone we come across. So any new person who we become into relationship with, they go through the ringer with us quite often, and we kind of put them through the paces. And so one of the things that ends up happening is that we behave in this way, and so we're constantly on guard and constantly looking to see, like, are you going to be here? Are there signs that you're going to stay? What are you doing? And so, for me personally, I had a very strong belief that people always leave. And it was, very much rooted in my experience of wanting to find people to connect to who I felt, would accept me and appreciate me, take me for who I am, and then constantly feeling like I would end up in relationships where I had to prove something, or I had to change a little something here in order for that person to stay, right? And so on one hand, while I would be doing all of these things to think that I was adapting and changing in order to kind of protect and preserve the relationship, in the background, I always had this belief, people are going to leave, people are going to leave, people are going to leave. So guess what? People around me didn't stick around too long.
So, kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
It does, because I would act crazy. I mean, I would have like a really good, time with someone, and then it would get to a certain point, and I would think, okay, wait a minute, this is about the time they're going to leave, so let me just go ahead and make that happen anyway, right? And so I'd be obnoxious, or I'd be difficult, or I'd be suspicious, or just throw temper tantrums, whatever it was. And, so one of the things that's the hardest to do, but that really made a big difference in my own journey and in my own recovery, was I had to really acknowledge and get straight about the role that I was playing that was leading, to the recreation of experiences that were abandoning over and over again. I kept wanting to look outside of myself and say, man, people are always leaving, nobody sticks around, I can't count on anyone, I can't trust anyone. But, man, when I had to turn that table and really look at myself and say, okay, but wait a minute, what kind of choices am I making in my relationships that are, causing them to break down? What kind of people am I choosing to get connected to in the first place? I started really seeing some things that were hard to see, but also freeing. Because once I started to notice that, I could say, well, wait a minute, I can make different choices about how I behave in my relationships. I can do better. I can learn. I can really start to try to trust that people, can be counted on, and looking for all the evidence that shows that they could, as opposed to trying to prove that they couldn't be.
Yeah, that's so true. And thank you, Rachel, for your honesty. It is such a difficult thing when we set up these patterns where we develop these insecure attachments. And when we're insecure, we create demands on a relationship. And by the very virtue that we are feeling insecure in our attachment to someone, we very often unconsciously will push them away. And I've done it, and I'm sure that most of us who come from abuse backgrounds have done it at one point or another. But you're so right, being able to stop and look at the role that we're playing. Is it our fault that we fear we're going to be abandoned? No. And yet when we internalize that fear and we then play that fear out into every relationship, we do just create these environments where people don't want to be around us because of the very insecurity that drives us to either cling to someone or push somebody away. So what are some of those behaviors that survivors fall into in an effort to try to prevent abandonment?
Sure. Well, this is a common behavior in all sorts of relationships, whether people have been abused or not. There's this sense when we enter into things that we're, open and exciting, and we just want to get to know the person, and we're just so happy to have them there. But very soon we start to understand, we start to have this sense of the not knowing, like, well, I don't know where this is going. Is this person going to stay here? Are we going to get married? Are we going to just be really happy together and have this great long relationship or friendship? And so that sense of not knowing becomes a little thorn in our side, and so we start to do all sorts of things to try to alleviate that, to try to gain some sort of guarantee, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the common behaviors is to be over-controlling. We start to say, okay, I'm going to really make sure that I'm managing everything that's happening in this relationship, because if I can be on top of everything, then there's no room for error, there's no room for problems, so that'll somehow guarantee that the person's going to be in my life and stay in my life, right? And it can take all sorts of forms. It could go from just, crazy texting, like you have to text me all the time, and, I had a client who was like that, which I can share and talk a little bit later, but, to very small things like I want you to sit at the table with me when I eat, and we are always going to have every meal together, which on one hand sounds like connection, sounds like relationship, right? Like, well, let's, make sure we share meals and have a conversation. But the underlying motivation for that isn't like love, affection, relationship. It's I want you in my sights, and I want you here with me and nowhere else, right?
Mm-hmm. That really resonates with me, the whole issue of control. It's when we're so afraid that a relationship is going to fall apart. It seemed, when I first married, it seemed to me just the deep desire to have a healthy marriage and to make the marriage work, but instead it ended up being that I was over-controlling and I was pushing my husband away from me, that I was so scared that because I was going to do something wrong or because he was just going to reject me the way that I had been rejected by so many other people in my life, that I tried everything I knew to fit our marriage into this little box that would ensure that nothing was going to go wrong. And yet, in the very act of doing that, something was going wrong.
Yeah, right. Isn't that the case? That's the irony all the time of these sorts of things, that, the thing that we think we're gaining or pushing ourselves towards is actually quite the opposite. Yeah.
So
and I certainly was that way as well.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that another type of behavior that we sometimes fall into is instead of trying to control the behaviors and actions, we try to control the emotions of the other person, and in the form of kind of seeking reassurance all the time, that we want them to be constantly kind of telling us that they're here, that they love us, that they're not going anywhere, or are constantly on the lookout for, are they withdrawing, are they near, are they far, and so you end up in many ways suffocating your partner because they have no room to kind of explore, have other relationships, have other experiences, because you interpret that as a betrayal or as a withdrawal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy to go from there to really create an enmeshed relationship where it's not okay to be individuals. It's not okay to have your own likes and dislikes, your own friends, your own thoughts, your own values, your own beliefs. Instead, you have to be just this unit and do everything together and think the same and feel the same feelings and hold to the same beliefs about everything. And it just becomes stifling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right.
Yeah. So how can we overcome this fear of abandonment, Rachel?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. How do we get past this nonsense, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, so earlier we were talking about a definition of abandonment, and when I was, researching abandonment and thinking about this area of life, I came upon a definition that had this as the second part: to give up the control of, to yield oneself without restraint or moderation. I'll say it one more time, just so it's there. Again, to give up the control of, to yield oneself without restraint or moderation. And, I remember reading that and thinking, maybe what I need to do is abandon myself to abandonment.
Golly, maybe the answer is in the very question, huh?
I know. Isn't that amazing? Right. And what I thought, as I thought about that more, I was like, okay, what does that really mean? To give up control of, to yield. And what I decided was that, our relationships and we ourselves as individuals can really thrive if we're willing to shift our focus and energy away from trying to prevent the withdrawal of others. And instead, we focus our energy into being in relationship and being present to the fact that people are here with us right now, in this moment.
Celebrate the moment, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is one of the first key factors, that instead of maneuvering to try to get some guarantee that your partner will always be here no matter what, that they're always going to love you no matter what, that instead turn your attention to appreciation, that the person is there right now.
Very well said. Very well said. Because when we don't, we lose the moment and we lose the value that each moment can hold, because we may have some history with someone and we may hope for a future with someone, but really all we can live is today with them. And if we have today, then being fully present in that day and fully appreciative of what they are able to offer us and what they're able to receive from us and how we're able to connect in that moment is what will build that future history and will bond us for hopefully the future that we desire to have.
You got it. Yeah, I mean, the fear of abandonment keeps us so focused on future what-ifs that we just miss out on everything that's happening right now.
That's right.
Again, what's tragic is that we end up behaving so poorly in the present because of our fear that we end up with the very result that we thought we were trying to avoid or that we thought we were, going to prevent. When we instead think about, wow, I have this person right here in my space. Who do I want to be for that person right now in this moment? What kind of experience do I want to have with this person right now? That you end up making choices that deepen your bond, that deepen your connection, and then guess what? You end up staying together. Not guaranteed. Right. Again, there's no guarantee. And I think that's one of the day I woke up and said, there are no guarantees in relationships. It's like, okay, I have to let that one go. That is not on the table when it comes to being in a relationship. That's not something you get to have. I mean, people who have been together for 20 years, you might think, oh, they have a guarantee, they're good. No, people change all the time. But our goal and our striving in relationship doesn't have to be about kind of locking someone down and becoming, insulated from pain, right? It's true. About being open and available and being on the journey, right?
That's right, and sharing that journey together, because as you said, if either or both of you stop changing, the relationship stops growing. And then at best it will become boring and you'll lose interest. At worst, the relationship will just die. And so to move forward on your own journey, and as you move, as you grow, as you change, to be able to continue to open yourself up to interacting with the second person in the relationship who is hopefully doing on their own journey and doing their own growing, makes kind of a new adventure every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so developing our tolerance for that sort of, change and growth and transformation is, one of the things that some of us have to grow in. Again, it's getting outside of that control. It's like, okay, wait a minute, we've always had dinner at 6 o'clock. Now you want to start to have dinner at 6:15. What are you doing? We get all anxious and buggy about things like that. But instead, I love what you're saying. Yeah, being able to share that journey and that transformation and building each other up and helping each other, along the way to grow and become better people. And sometimes as you do that, people grow out of you, right? Or people grow into spaces where the relationship doesn't make sense anymore. And, I think that part of the problem in relationship generally and kind of our social norms about relationships right about now in these days is that relationships that don't go on a certain path aren't of value, that every relationship, your goal is about determining, is this going to be a marriage, is this going to be a long-term thing, right? And so we so quickly fall into trying to figure out what it is going to be that we're not appreciating what it is right now.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah.
I'll say go ahead. Go ahead, Misa.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the other thing then. So we have this whole problem, first of all, of getting into the future. The other problem is that kind of what I mentioned, that, we're trying to guarantee that things won't fall apart. And so, people who have been abused, those of us who have been abused, we're very risk averse, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we often make the worst decisions about who to get into relationship with. And so what we need to do, there is no getting away from taking risks in relationships, right? In fact, that's part of what brings the life and and craziness and fun and energy to relationships, is that there's a little bit of risk. There's something on the line. But what we do need to learn is how to take calculated risks.
Good point.
And so, I certainly had the nasty habit of connecting to people who were so high risk that, I pretty much was setting myself up for failure. And, the payoff of that, one of the things that we do is we have these patterns, we have these beliefs about ourselves or about relationships. And remember, like mine was people always leave. And consciously or unconsciously, however you want to call it, we'll often end up finding people who are going to help us reinforce those stories, because sometimes it's just safer. It feels safer and more comfortable to just go on believing the thing that we've always believed about ourselves, rather than challenging it and pushing outside of that box. So I'll tell you a quick story about one of my clients who I was working with, just to kind of illustrate this a little bit. So he was very intent on the I need the guarantee, right? I want to find a reason to believe that this person, this girlfriend, is going to be with me all the time and never going to go anywhere. And it manifested itself in him texting her like every couple of hours. Where are you? What's going on? And if he didn't get an immediate response, like within 5 minutes, he would go into such a story in his head that, she was with somebody else, she's cheating on me, she doesn't love me anymore, this relationship's never going to work. He'd just drive himself batty. And of course, that would then interfere in their relationships, because he would go back to her, where were you, and being very, interrogating her. And, of course, nobody wants to be on that end of a relationship. So as we worked together to kind of challenge these beliefs, the first thing he had to acknowledge was that while it was possible that she was with somebody else, that it was unlikely, given all of the experiences they had shared. So we went into kind of evaluating the risk that he was taking in believing her, in trusting her, and being open to her.
Okay.
And as he started to kind of do his list and reflection of, like, the things she does that, I can count on, the ways that I can trust her, the experiences that we've had over the, past 3 years that have, meant a lot to us and have, led me to, believe her, and all of the things that, choices she had made, things she had said, things she had done. He came to understand that the risk he was taking in trusting her was well calculated, right? She didn't have a history of cheating. She hadn't gone anywhere else, right? There wasn't anything in that history other than his own fears that was leading him down that road of thinking. So, when we think about evaluating situations, we have to really grow and learn and become skilled at just figuring out what kind of risks we're taking. And it doesn't mean we can't be daring. It doesn't mean we can't be bold in the choices that we make. But we want to be bold and daring, but not like playing with fire. Does that make sense?
There is a difference, yes.
I had another client who said, relationships never work for me. They always fail. I give up. I'm never going to trust a man ever again. They always leave. And so as I got into her relationship history, 9 out of 10 times she was dating a married man.
Oh, dear.
Right?
That makes it rather difficult to have a long-term relationship.
It does. It does. And that was a rough day in coaching for us, when I was like, okay, let's just take a look at this for a minute. Let's take a hard look at the people you're choosing. But when she got that, it was like, oh, my gosh, I'm totally doing this to myself, right?
There's a pattern there.
There's a pattern there, right? Yeah. So I would, so just to summarize, those two things have been what's been most useful to me. Getting out of the future thinking, and it's not so much that the future thinking is a bad thing. It's really more so that we want to be inspired by the future. If you have the thought like, oh man, I really want to spend the rest of my life with this person, don't go into fear and control, Go into, well, if that's what I want, let me be generous. Let me be loving today. Let me be open today. Let the future be an inspiration rather than fear-producing.
Yeah.
And then,
moving out of fear is a real setup to shut down a relationship, and yet having that fear of abandonment is also a setup. It's very difficult to move beyond that. But as you shared, making the choice to give up control and to remain in the present moment can really help us to take our eyes off of that fear.
Yeah, that's right.
So you talk about letting go of trying to control our future. Does that mean that thinking about the future is a bad thing, or trying to plan for the future or look into the future is it negative?
No, not at all. As I kind of started to say, I think that the value and the benefit of the future is that it can be inspiring, that we want to think about what it is that we are aiming for and what our ultimate end game is, right? Doesn't mean that we don't want to have any kind of investment or any kind of hope for where a relationship might go, or a job or a career, or any of those things. I mean, people have these sorts of fears and concerns about jobs in addition to just people, or, all sorts of stuff come up, friendships. And so we want to let the future be our guide as far as our behavior today in the positive, right, and be an inspiration to what we're doing. And one of the things that often happens with abandonment is that we get into anxiety. We go into the what-if story, right? Well, if this person leaves, this is, what's going to happen to me? Or if, this relationship doesn't work out, I'm never going to fall in love again, or I'm never going to be okay, and those sorts of things. And so, one of the ways that you can manage those sorts of fears that come up when you find yourself getting into the what-if game, right? The way that I have found, or the exercise that I have found that's the most effective for kind of dealing with that sort of anxiety about the future is to talk through all the different steps, all the different stages that you think might happen, and come up with how you're going to respond, right? And so what if my boyfriend leaves me? Okay, well, what if he leaves you? Well, I'm going to be devastated. I'm going to be very sad. Okay, great. You're going to be very sad. How long do you want to be very sad for? Oh, I'm going to be sad for a really long time. Okay, great. You're going to be sad for a really long time. Then what are you going to do? People are usually like, well, I guess I would, go spend some time with friends. I might, go out, take us to new hot. Okay, great. So, you've gone out, you're spending more time with friends. Then what are you going to do? And people start to notice that they often can come up with their solution. They can often come up with their next step, their next plan of action, regardless of what is happening. And that just tempers down the anxiety. It causes the body on a biological level to calm down hormonally by, all the chemicals that are going on, the shooting anxiety, that emotion, that fear, right? When we're in fear, the amygdala is pumping juice into our body. And the reason why it sometimes feels like, oh my gosh, I can't get a handle on this, is because the amygdala has like 3 times the amount of force as the prefrontal cortex has to go send messages back that say, calm the hell down.
Exactly.
And so what we do when we get outside of like the loop thinking is we give the prefrontal cortex time to kind of invade and tamp down and bring order back to the chaos, right? To calm the storm, right? And so anything that you can do, go ahead.
There's a tool that I have used to help calm the amygdala down, and that is called EFT, emotional, emotional freedom therapy. You can look it up online. It's also known as tapping. And there are pressure points that we can use, that we can walk through this little exercise. You can look it up online, that will actually physically calm the amygdala down while the prefrontal cortex has the time and the ability to move in and to speak some sense into us, where we're not just reacting out of our old fears.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that really is such a core piece of all of this is reining in the brain, right? Abandonment, is not so much. It really is a process of thinking. It's a process of survival. If you want to get back to the core root of everything, right? Our connection to each other is partly driven by biological instincts, because when we're connected, we're surviving.
That's right.
And so, what we need, in addition to, developing some practices around staying present, developing your skills in evaluating risks and not making choices that are, just setting you up. We also want to think about, how the brain works and learning some of those techniques like you're talking about for intercepting, the mind when it starts to go down that path. And, when you begin to identify, I would encourage, listeners to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and just identify the thoughts that you have around abandonment, around relationships. So often it comes back down to our own view of ourselves, what we think of ourselves. For me, there was a big shift when I realized that while I had the belief that people would always leave, because I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't deserving of love. And when I started paying attention to those thoughts and doing the work that, as I write about in my book, Beyond Surviving, like all the things that I ended up learning that I realized worked for me and made the difference for me in this journey, to really challenge those beliefs and transform them and break out of those patterns, then yes, in my relationships it would still come up, but I had such a deeper understanding and such a better connection to what was going on that I was often able to intercept and, calm down, get grounded again, bring myself back to the space where I was just being in relationship.
Exactly. Just being aware of what those beliefs and thought patterns are behind a lot of our emotions and our actions can really help us to find the tools to stop those patterns. And I know in your book you do a good job of presenting different tools and understanding of how to break those patterns.
Yeah, it's been, writing the book was one of the greatest journeys of my recovery so far, trying to kind of consolidate all that I have learned along the way, both through my own experience, through working with others, and, through my education. But, because really, at the end of the day, every choice that we make in behavior is driven by a thought. Every choice. We don't move our finger without there being a thought, even though it's not a direct thought. And so when I came to understand that, I realized that, from my experience of abuse, and then in addition, just life experiences, they don't have to be traumatic, they can be just something happens, and it leads us to have a certain belief, a certain thought that becomes entrenched. It really becomes locked in, so to speak. And so, one of the things that I came to realize is that, we have a lot of choice about the way that we perceive and think about situations. And, part of my hope, I'm so excited about, this 1 billion rising, it's really starting to feel like there's a lot of energy, coming right now in this world of recovery. It's gaining some momentum. It's really gaining some attention. And one of the things that I really hope that can be a part of that and a part of that message and a part of the change that's coming as far as how people understand recovery is that, you're not locked in. This is not a life sentence.
That's right.
It may be that, somewhere in the back of my head, the people always leave thing, it just sits there, but it sits there as like this little friend now who I look at and I go, hey, yeah, there you are again. Great. I remember you. but I've learned the tools and the skills and things that are necessary in order to not fall into those patterns nearly as often. Or if I do, I know what's going on. It's like I'm doing it, but at the same time I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. And I know how to snap out of it, right? And that's the difference, you know, and that's why I call my book Beyond Surviving, because I really, you know, want people to get and understand that there is an opportunity, there is another side to this mountain. You can get over that. And you can get to a place, you know, where you're happy and you're living and you're surviving. You're not just surviving, you're really full of energy and vitality, and you're not constantly every day, like, dealing with being the abuse, dealing with the effects of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a season that we need to go through to look at the reality and to experience some of the pain and to dig down, as we said, about what the false beliefs are that we have unconsciously embraced as a result of it. But Rachel, I just love your commitment to the recovery process for yourself and for your clients. That just encourages me so much. I just have always really enjoyed your energy around your own healing journey and how much enthusiasm you have in sharing that with other people. I just love that about you, Rachel.
Oh, thanks, Misa. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for sharing. Is there any last comments you'd like to make, or any words of advice for our audience who might be wanting to leave the abandonment issues in the dust?
Well, first of all, you can certainly visit my website. It's rachelgrantcoaching.com, and Rachel is R-A-C-H-E-L. And on my website, there's a blog. There are links to past talks that I've done on various issues of recovery and relationships. You can also sign up for my newsletter there, or download a free excerpt of the book. Parts 1 and 2 of the book are there for free download. And so please think of me as a resource. If you're listening today, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer emails. I'm happy to answer phone calls. You know, this is my work, but first and foremost, I really just, you know, want to see people getting better and moving on with their lives and not just kind of being stuck. So, you know, if you're worried about abandonment, the best piece of advice that I can give you is when you fall into your what-if stories, try to think about, what if I love this person today? What if I did something nice for my person today? What if I just trusted that I was good enough today? Just fill in the blank with something else. You know, just try to fill. I mean, that is like the most simplest, smallest first step you can ever take is just fill in the blank with something else. And, you know, your little voice may come in and be like, ha, 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 no way. I remember, like, when I would do this stuff, I would say, well, what if I'm lovable? And I would just go, oh, that's ridiculous. Well, I don't care. What if I'm lovable? You know?
That's great.
Then I was like, wow, I'm pretty damn lovable.
So that's great. You are. Yeah. You are lovable, Rachel. Well, I just have to recommend Rachel's blog to you. It's an award-winning blog, and she does a really awesome job with it. So I really encourage you to take a look at her blog. And, again, thank you, Rachel, for spending the time with us today and for opening your heart and for just the work that you've done in your own healing life and what you're giving to other people. It's awesome. And I'm thinking that we could maybe do a future episode on the issues of intimacy and trust, because that's kind of the antidote to living in our abandonment fears. And as you alluded to earlier, we can make decisions to take calculated risks, and that is how we move forward in trust, kind of one baby step at a time. So that might be something that we talk about in the future. And I want to encourage all of you in my listening audience out there, don't try to heal in isolation, but get connected and get involved. And whether that means that you make a commitment to doing some life coaching, some therapy, working with a spiritual director, getting involved in a support group, showing up at 1 Billion Rising, I really strongly encourage you to get involved with other people. And as Rachel shared earlier, this movement is growing, and as evidenced by 1 Billion Rising, we are rising, and we're rising together. And the day of being isolated in our little caves of shame is about to be over, and I hope that you're going to join us in that place of linking arms with fellow survivors and saying, I can move beyond this abuse. I can move beyond being a victim. I can even move beyond being a survivor. I can be a thriver, because you can. And Rachel is an example of that. And there are many, many more people out there who are as well. So be sure to check out our Facebook page and to spread the word. Just look up Beyond Abuse Radio on Facebook, or go to my website, www.misacoach.com. And feel free to share your ideas for future shows for Beyond Abuse Radio, or feedback for current or past shows as well. My email is inspire@misacoach.com, M as in Mary, I-S-A, and feel free to shoot me a message and tell me what's on your mind and what you would like to see or hear at Beyond Abuse Radio. I do have openings for clients. I do transformation coaching, spiritual direction. I also do something called Theophostic Prayer Ministry. Look on my website for more information. I work with people by phone, by Skype, or in person. And I just want to thank you today for joining me on this amazing journey of healing. And I hope that today you make the decision to give yourself the time and energy you need to embrace all of your precious self in love, and that you will let others come to know and love you too, because the truth is, dear, that you are truly beautiful. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.